Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the True Life Podcast. Got a great show for you today. We have Jonathan Glass. He's a naturopathic doctor, owner of the Healing Essence Center, author of an alluring new book called The Total Life Cleanse, a 28-day program to detoxify and nourish the body, the mind, and the soul. A compassionate humanitarian who sees well-being through the bifocals of Chinese and Ayurvedic medicine. Jonathan Glass, how are you today, my friend?
I'm great. Thanks so much for having me.
You've been pretty busy with I can only imagine with the crisis that we've went through. You've got a new book out, you got the Healing Center. You know, maybe you could just introduce yourself and talk a little bit about who you are and how you got to be where you're at.
Okay, sure. My name's Jonathan. Thanks for introducing me, George. And I have been practicing acupuncture and then Ayurveda, which is a system of medicine from India, naturopathy since about mid 90s. And my wife and I have a holistic health center in Concord, Massachusetts, way on the other side of the planet from where you are. And we do a lot of stuff here. You know, one of the things that I do that I got into early in the mid 90s was focusing a bit on detoxification, but not just that, also lifestyle. So I have the Total Life Cleanse. That's my book, and it's a big book. It's about 400 pages, but it's real readable, and it has a lot of information about not just how to detox, which is super important, but also some really good lifestyle tips, ways to expand our awareness and our connection to our lives, like that. So that's what we're doing. So my wife is a psychic medium, and she's very quite well known in this area, and she's amazing. And so we have a couple other practitioners that work out of here, and so things have been going really good. We've been very busy, like you said. You know, since the pandemic, everything has changed in terms of the types of things we're treating and the mindset of people and the stress levels of people. It's just sort of off the chart. You know, we have a little bit of a calmer zone now, but the things I'm seeing are very different than what I used to see.
What kind of things are you seeing now that you didn't previously see?
Okay. So in one sense, I have to explain it from an
Sure.
acupuncture perspective, because when we're looking at when we're looking at when we're looking sorry
Yeah.
when we're looking at the energy in the body, that's called the chi or the prana. It's the bioelectric energy of the body, and that travels in very specific ways. So it's kind of like when a meridian, which is related to an organ and
Hmm.
also a mental function, when that system gets really stressed, that system will blow a fuse. It's kind of like the bioelectric energy of the body. Literally, people's energies or their fuses get blown. So now we can tell by feeling the pulse which fuses are working well, which ones aren't. And during the pandemic, I was seeing a particular block that I had only seen maybe once a month. And I started seeing it 5, 10, sometimes 20 times a week. And it basically means a huge part of the system is blown out, not functioning well. And another part of the body, of the energy body, is trying to take over and doing the job. I liken it kind of to be, um, she just left. I liken it to kind of be like a single mother who has
Hmm.
to work all day long, take care of the kids at night, feed the kids in the morning, get them dressed, take them to school, work all day long, and then do the same thing with no help whatsoever. So that's what's happening to human beings right now, is they're getting extremely stressed, and they just get whacked up. People come in all the time and they're like, I sleep for 12 hours and I wake up and I don't feel any better. That's happening. So that particular energy block is really, really common. The other thing I'm seeing a lot of is this mental clarity issues, low moods, just lower energy. And I have seen an uptick in cancer also, like reoccurrences of cancer. So
It's a
that's kind of what I'm
yeah.
seeing. That's just an example. Yeah.
It's fascinating to me. And, when it seems to me on some level, we're talking about harmony and balance. And I'm wondering if the human body seems to be part and parcel of the planet, because a lot of the things you're describing are the same things that are happening actually on the planet. Like there are these new blockages happening, whether it's through
Right.
supply chains or whether it's through,
Mm.
just this crazy egoistic things but it's
Hmm.
weird. Is there some sort of line we can draw between the planet's alignment and its meridians and the body's alignment and its meridians?
I would say absolutely, because when you think about it, what did the ancient sages, and the mystics and the yogis and the acupuncture or the Chinese medicine masters and the herbalists, things like that, what did they actually do? They were looking at nature, um, and from observing nature and understanding the elements of nature, earth, water, fire, air, metal, or wood, like that. And they were observing what are the properties of those elements. And they also observed that those very same elements are within the human body. So, in a simple way, if you know it's been raining for 3 months straight, that's going to create a damp condition on the earth. And lo and behold, a lot of the issues that human beings will have at that time will be damp conditions. A damp condition is a cold or a flu or a, feeling heavy or foggy headed or something like that. So what's happening in nature will oftentimes show up in the body or aggravate the body. So, for example, in Chinese medicine, if somebody has green phlegm in the lungs, that's called damp heat in the lungs.
Hmm.
So, in the herbs and the acupuncture is around what are herbs that decrease dampness and decrease heat. They're not thinking, oh, he has a bacterial bronchitis infection. It's looking at it from the angle of this person has damp heat in the lungs. So, what are herbs that are drying and cooling? And now we discover those very herbs actually have antibiotics in them. So, in the same way, that's just in terms of nature. Now, if we have things that are obstructing those elements in nature, you know, like you said, the food chain,
Yeah.
the supply chain, nature, chemicals, toxins, so many things, that's impacting the elements of nature, which is going to also show up in the human body. So there's definitely a huge connection there, no doubt.
It's a be- it's it Thanks for pointing that out. I think it's a beautiful way to not only understand yourself but understand your environment and understand that there are there are signs around you that, hey, maybe if this thing's happening outside your body, that same thing's directly affecting the inside of your body. And it's a beautiful way to be in
Right.
harmony and understand who you are. I wonder if a lot of people when they think about Chinese medicine, they think about acupuncture, tai chi, and herbs. Are those strategies you use, or are you familiar with those strategies? Are those something that you practice commonly when you focus on the Chinese part of what you do?
So your voice was breaking up a little
Oh,
bit. I think your
okay.
question was, yeah, you could repeat that question again.
Sure. So a lot of people when they think
Better
of
now.
traditional Chinese medicine, they think of acupuncture, tai chi, and herbal medicine. Are those some of the most common
Right.
practices that you utilize when working on the Chinese side of your practice?
Yes, we use certainly herbs. We use acupuncture. Recommend different forms, whether it's yoga or tai
Right.
chi, qigong, something like that, is really important, because it's all working with the energy in the body, energy in the mind. So it's all working simultaneously. Yeah, and in the old days, the first treatment was uh, was things that you could do for yourself. The Tai Chi, Qigong, yoga, diet, nutrition. Those things are all super important. These days, people tend to go to practitioners because they're I use the technical term, kind of whacked out. And then, you know, that's where we have to work on the diet, on the exercise, on how to move the body, how to breathe, all those different basic things that in the modern culture uh, tends to be put on the back burner. But those were the first most important aspects of both Ayurveda and Chinese medicine: diet, exercise, breathing, you know, like that. And then you would do things like herbs and acupuncture. But these days we pull it all together. It's kind of like it's wild and crazy times. So, we have to come at all different angles. But honestly, that's why we started the cleanse in the late, or actually like mid late 90s, was because we were finding that no matter how much acupuncture I did, or chiropractic, or and trying to make little recommendations to people, um, there were really difficult patients who weren't making progress. And I had just gotten out of school in 95, and it wasn't fun to have the same person come back every week saying they had the same problem, but you knew they had, a lot of lifestyle issues. So we put together a program. And, whenever you get people together focused on the same thing, and, increasing their level of awareness, and, looking at things in life a little differently, quantum shifts tend to happen. And we found that people, like even our, what we called our difficult patients, made a quantum shift. And so now every week the conversation wasn't like, okay, I'm down to 5 Snicker bars a day from 13. Now it's like I'm eating clean now. I'm eating lots of greens. I'm eating well. I'm breathing well. I'm not drinking nearly as much alcohol, just a little bit of coffee as opposed to 12 cups a day. The whole lifestyle changed. So now it's easy to treat that person. And, the herbs are going to really work well. The acupuncture is going to work really well because they've made those foundational changes. So, that was why I got into that. And it was just, I didn't know back then that was going to be a big part of my practice, but I found out how important it is and how essential it is. So,
Yeah, you know, I want to get to the topic of cleanses, but before I get there,
sure.
it seems to me that people who find themselves in a position wanting to help people have often gone through a traumatic experience themselves. And I'm wondering, was there something that pushed you down the road, or maybe something that grabbed your hand and said, walk with me? Or, is there
Sure.
something that took you down the road that you're at today to get you where you are?
Yeah. Well, there's probably a number of things, but I would say the most, specific thing was, ever since I was really young. I was premature as a baby, which is, not that uncommon, but that can, often mean or indicate that the baby isn't getting enough nourishment for some reason, not necessarily fault of the mother, but there could be some issue with that. But that's the understanding now. Came out a little premature. And then I was very sensitive. And back then, a lot of mothers didn't breastfeed. So I was very sensitive to the formula, and I couldn't do milk. So I was very sensitive to milk. So I had a lot of severe allergies as a kid, had pneumonia twice. I was in an oxygen tent, that type of thing. And then throughout my early years and through my teens, I had horrendous allergies. All of my baseball shirts were always yellow because I was always rubbing my nose like that, on the sleeves. And I was athletic. I loved being outside and playing sports and stuff, but it was pretty bad. And every year, I would say I was on an antibiotic, maybe twice a year. Uh, I was a captain of my high school hockey team, and half of the season I'm coughing like crazy on the ice. So it was always like that. And then what happened was, in college, I was playing on the soccer team, and I was getting frustrated because I was having lung issues again. And like I said, I was a good athlete, and but the lungs were always getting in the way. And I went to the local health food store in Gettysburg, Pennsylvania, and I met this really cool guy. And Rusty, I still remember him. And he gave me a book called Back to Eden, which was an old naturopathic book, kind of like a Bible. It was this huge book. And it was kind of wild and crazy. And he had a solution for everything in that book. And I just looked up allergies, and it said stop drinking dairy and, become vegetarian. I'm like, okay. So overnight, of course, I didn't know how to be a vegetarian, so I was eating peanut butter and jelly sandwiches every day, and iceberg lettuce, and and no more milk and cheese. But the crazy thing is, I felt better than I ever felt in my life, lung wise. And then later, I figured out how to eat better. But that was a transitional experience for me, because almost within 2 weeks, my congestion was gone, my lungs stopped, being filled up. Before a soccer game, because my coach would say, eat a lot of, eat heavy the night before, I would have an extra cheese uh, hamburger pizza the night before a soccer game, and I could barely move the next day. It took me, half the game before I could even start really moving, and I'd be coughing, and I don't know how I didn't make the connection, but I never made the connection. And then when I finally changed my diet, everything started changing. And then there was a few other things that happened, sort of semi-mystical, connections of, confirmations from the universe saying, move in this direction. And I just became very passionate about it, and realized at some point that I was going to be teaching cleanses to people.
Yeah, the idea of a cleanse is it's something that's been around for a long time, and
Yeah,
it can
absolutely.
be have so many different dimensions, because a lot of people, they think of a cleanse as maybe a fast, but
Right.
there's a lot more opportunities, a lot more dimensions to it. Like, what about the people in your life that are negative? What about the negative influences in your life? What about your
Right.
ideas and purging? Like, the idea of a cleanse can be so much. So first off, can you define what, in your idea, what a cleanse is, and then maybe tell us about the way in which you set up a cleanse?
Yeah. So that's a great question, and I think what you're saying is absolutely true, and that's why we used to call it the total body cleanse,
Okay,
and then we changed it to the total life cleanse.
nice.
And
That's well done.
we also like TLC thing, but it's about your whole life. It's about your whole life.
Yeah.
Um, Cleansing is an opportunity to reset the body, mind, and spirit, and remove obstacles to our optimal well-being. And like you said, and in Ayurveda, there's a word called ama, AMA. Ama means toxin. And in Ayurveda, which is a system of medicine from India, it's like the sister of the yoga system, says that ama, or toxin, is the cause of all disease. So what does that mean? It doesn't necessarily mean you can't ever be exposed to toxins. But what it does mean is that toxins on a physical level, mental level, emotional level, all have to be managed and dealt with. Um, some bodies, excrete, heavy metals, different chemicals better than other bodies. But the reality is, we're living in the world, and you think about it in Ayurveda, they would recommend cleansing twice a year, in the spring and the fall. That was when the air was pure, the water was pure, you know. Now it's like we're swimming in a sea of chemicals and toxins and heavy
Yeah.
metals, over 100,000 chemicals in the environment. Only 20,000 have ever been tested for human safety. I mean, not to mention, all the things that we've been exposed to the past few years. Um, so we have to help the body eliminate those toxins, and also strengthen the body so it doesn't hold on to those things as well. But also, in doing that, what I found was that a lot of times, when we start clearing the body of some of the gunk and start eating better and cleaner, then the mind starts getting
Mm.
clearer. And then you're able to deal with some of these mental, emotional toxins much more effectively. Like, I tell people, okay, if you're going to a therapist, but you're drinking, 5 cups of coffee with 2 tablespoons of sugar in each coffee a day, with soda, and eating, fast food, that therapy is not going to work nearly as well, because you're numbing out, your blood sugar's all over the map. We're doing so many things to ourselves that are causing imbalance, and every organ has an emotional correspondence. So if you're stressing the physical liver, you're going to become more irritable. If you're stressing the, the physical kidneys, you're going to become more anxious and fearful. So by taking the burden off the body, everything we do physically, mentally, spiritually is benefited. So, that's kind of in a nutshell is how I approach cleansing.
Yeah, it's nice to think of it like gears on a watch, and like if one's
Mm-hmm.
rusted, it's not going to turn, But if you go in
Mm-hmm.
there and clean the rust off piece A, and then you spray the stuff over, it's going to turn and work better like it's supposed to work.
Exactly. Little WD-40 for the watch.
That's awesome. Yeah, it's interesting. I think that most people, if they're honest with themselves, they know if they sit in quiet darkness or they just take time for themselves, they can begin to see what it is they need to work on. And if they
Yeah.
find themselves, beginning a cleanse, whether it's eating better or whether it's starting to get rid of some people in their life that say mean things to them or that they accept those things, you really can begin to find a balance and a harmony in your life that can
Right.
make you live a better life. I'm wondering, uh, it seems that when we look back at, I don't know if is it I think I might be saying it wrong. Ayurvedic,
Ayurveda. Yeah.
Ayurvedic. So when you look back, there's such a rich history there, and we
Yeah.
see that it is something that has been used not only in India but has made its way through different sort of native peoples, and they've used similar methods of
Right.
solving problems. And then the Western medicine comes in, and it seems that I don't know that Western medicine has always been something that has been driven by profit, but it seems to me that the quest for profit has made Western medicine more of a coping strategy rather than a solving strategy. They want to give you a pill, they want to give you a band-aid, get you coming in. And it's almost like everything's based on addiction, where maybe the Ayurvedic way is like, we want to help you understand what the problem is so you can fix it. Am I getting that right, in your
Yeah,
opinion?
I think you really are. Um, you know, I, I I have a saying, and I mostly believe it, which is I have no problem with Western medicine except for the wrong use of Western medicine. Um, these days there's a lot of wrong use of Western medicine, but there are times when
Sure.
I think a lot of us can be very grateful that you know uh, whether it was the antibiotic or the surgery. Of course, in Ayurveda, surgery was also part of the it was part of the system. In fact, Ayurveda, as far as historically was uh, taught the original surgery on the planet. I mean, they were doing it way back then. But I think one of the things is like in Ayurveda means knowledge of life. So in that knowledge of life, it's considering all the elements and it's considering the body, the physical body made up of five elements, but it's considering the mind. It's considering what's called the buddhi or the innate intelligence, the part of us that has wisdom. It considers the ego. And the ego is not in Ayurveda, is not seen as an evil thing, but the ego can get out of balance, you know. And then there's consciousness that's included in the Ayurvedic system. What does it mean to have a smooth consciousness or a rough consciousness? And then there's the Atma, the self, or the spark of life you know that is basically the energy behind everything inside the physical body. And then it gets even more philosophical than that, in terms of what's the source of everything. It's part of the whole cosmic uh, paradigm that it's looking at. But it's a very comprehensive, very, very holistic approach that is very, very effective and can deal with viruses and bacterias and all kinds of things. But Western medicine tends to be a band-aid approach. It doesn't okay, if someone has high cholesterol, let's just turn it down. Let's just do a drug to interfere something. If somebody has acid reflux, then let's just shut off the switch so people won't secrete acid. If someone has high blood pressure, okay, maybe change the diet a little bit, but okay, yeah, exercise, that's fine, but we'll just take a drug. So, and I'm not saying I'm not saying it's not
Right.
ever appropriate. Sometimes it's very appropriate,
Yeah.
especially to get somebody over a hump, you know, but there's ways to do things that are not approached that way. And, and also because, like you mentioned, unfortunately, even if there's some very good things about Western medicine, which there are, if something is so highly driven by profit, if something is so driven by profit, then sorry about the phone there.
That's all right. Minor.
Okay. Then it becomes a problem
Yeah.
because, I mean, I was just reading today that there were doctors and pediatricians that were, given a lot of money if a certain percentage of their patients get the vaccine, for example.
Mm.
Now, to me, that's a huge conflict of interest because now you're promoting something for a financial gain and you're a doctor. And that's not good. You should be looking at what is the actual benefit, the best thing for that patient. Not, well, it's probably good based on data. There might be some benefit, but, hey, I could make an extra $40,000 here. So this isn't good. And that's true across the board, in the pharmaceutical industry. They control a lot and they make a lot of money. So there's some big conflicts of interest, which in the medical world, I don't want to go to a doctor that has a conflict of interest. I want to go to somebody who really cares, and a lot of doctors do really care, but a lot of doctors have their hands tied by the rules and regulations of the organization that they're working in, the hospital or the setting that they're working in. They can't say anything different than what the policy that's coming from above is telling them. So the system itself, we have Western medicine itself, which has some real blessings to it and some real issues, because of some of the drugs aren't great to use, or prematurely given to somebody when that person can really just, I mean, we've had people who've had to come off of their high blood pressure medicine because their blood pressure started getting too low during the cleanse, but just by changing their diet, blood pressure came down. Their cholesterol numbers came way down. They don't need the medicine anymore. So, there are cases where, damn, if somebody's blood pressure is so high that they're in danger of having a stroke, give them the damn medicine, and then try to figure out how to bring it down in a healthy way. So, yeah, so the medicine itself can have an issue, but even in in a good case scenario of a healthy, good, solid use of Western medicine, like I said, there are many ways in which it's awesome. If it's driven by money and financial interest, that's a problem. And that's kind of the world and I would call that a toxin. That's a big toxin in the, pharmaceutical industry right now. So it's a big problem.
Yeah, that's really well said. I'm glad that you would put it that way. There are cases where we are really fortunate to live in a world where we have the technological prowess of Western medicine, and they do great
Absolutely.
things at times. It seems to me, on some level, the breakdown of spirituality has really caused medicine to be lacking. And what I mean by that is, you know, the breakdown of the spiritual connection, the idea that, you know, it seems to me big pharma is able to get into medicine because of a lack of morality on some level. And
Right.
that, I think, has a spiritual connection to it. And, maybe what we're seeing, well, maybe what we're beginning to see is like this idea, this merger with all this chaos that we saw and all this, clinical testing on people that were unaware of it, with just, sticking people with these drugs that we've never tested, and the profit margin and the just the violation of the Nuremberg Code and all these things. Maybe what we're beginning to see is something of a merger between Eastern and Western medicine. It's kind of beautiful to think about. We got people like you, and we have people that are really willing to help people cleanse their body, willing to provide people with the natural way of getting better. And on top of that, also having the availability of a disaster management. If your appendix breaks, you can be rushed to the hospital. And in some ways, I'm feeling like we're beginning to see this merger kind of coming together, like a holistic approach of this merger of the two.
Yeah.
Are you hopeful to see that, or do you see that kind of happening, or do you have maybe some concerns about
I
that
do. I
happening?
mean,
What do
I
you think?
see plenty of, I see, plenty.
Oh, it looks like we lost him here for a minute. Yeah, I think that the real issue is that the for-profit model of medicine is a big issue, and that if we can find a way. Oh, there you are. Now you're back.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
I was just talking while you kind of clipped out on us right there, so I was just filling some time right
Okay.
there.
Okay. So, should I continue?
Yeah, please.
Okay. So, yes. So there's definitely a movement toward that trend, no doubt. And I think and I think it comes in waves. Even after this, what we've been through recently, many doctors have become disillusioned with what they've been doing because they saw some things work and they saw some things that they believed, and now they're seeing some things that they believed that they aren't, didn't happen or aren't true or aren't accurate. So there's waves of this. So in one sense, in one realm of reality, the two worlds are blending really nicely because science, for instance, genetic testing can be really interesting and really amazing. Um, One of the problems with genetic testing, some companies are selling your information, so that's not good. I don't want my DNA sold to some lab in China or America for that matter. And that's what they're doing. Some of these companies are doing that. There are some DNA testing companies that have come out recently and they're not doing that. And they promise they're not going to do that. They're going to keep it in-house. But the data is really interesting, and it's really kind of fascinating to look at, like, okay, Ayurvedic body type or Chinese body type, comparing it to the genetic and seeing where those crossovers happen. Because it's really coming down to the constitution, like what are your tendencies? Because in Ayurveda, that's what we're looking at. Like one of the things is, what happens to you when you go out of balance? Like what's the patterns that tend to happen? And if we can learn to identify those patterns, then we can manage them better rather than, as I say in Ayurveda, better to be yourself imperfectly than try to be someone else perfectly. So, so that's what understanding our gifts and understanding our limitations physically, mentally, and emotionally is and spiritually is a good thing. And so the genetic testing helps us with that too. So that's what using Western science, imaging can be really helpful, like taking a look inside the body. I mean, why not? But then what you do with that's the issue. Like sometimes people say, well, I don't want to go to the doctor because he's going to tell me to do blah, blah, blah. So, well, no, get the diagnostics, get your blood work, get the scan, if it's a scannable thing, a thing that really should be looked at. And then we decide afterwards, you're not under no obligation to take that drug or do that surgery. Then you can think about it. Then you can, get your advice. You can get a second opinion. You can go to this, maybe a more naturally oriented doctor, and see if they can help you with that, So the world can really be bridged. But like to your point before, the issue is we have this huge financial control mechanism, which is controlling many, many doctors. I mean, a lot of doctors, for example, couldn't recommend certain drugs to their patients or else they'd get fired. But many doctors are coming out now, saying that this doctor, not naming names, but all the doctors in this hospital were taking those drugs themselves, but they weren't allowed to give it to other people because they'd lose their job if they did. So that ain't right. There's something wrong with that, right? So because of the control, the top, the control coming from above, from these, CDC, WHO, controlling what they're allowed to say, what they're allowed to do, means a lot of doctors barely can think. They're not even really allowed to use their intelligence. outside the box of those particular areas. So that's a problem. And
Yeah.
on the other hand, there's many doctors that are like, yeah, let's, you know, the worlds are merging. So, it's almost like the world's moving in two different directions.
Yeah. It's there. We have a comment that came on, and it kind of, I think you
Uh,
touched on I think you touched on a lot of the ideas, but maybe you have some other points that you could address to this comment. The comment is from Benjamin C. George at the No Absolutes podcast, and he says, "For-profit medicine, therapy, etc., is a broken pillar of society that justifies its necessity due to runaway capitalism. Our foundational philosophies of effort, worth, and value are flawed." Any thoughts on that?
Said very beautifully.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
Said very beautifully. Yeah, I mean, it's you summed it up. You summed it up in a really nice way. And uh, in Ayurveda, it's said, a student or a doctor is said to never be willing to recommend an herb or anything to a patient unless they've taken it themselves,
Hmm.
unless they're willing to take it themselves. So there's many. I've heard many situations where certain doctors are not willing to do this, that, or whatever, but they have to recommend something because it's part of a broken system based on greed. You know,
Hmm.
it's based on greed. What are you gonna? What can you say? It's based on greed and flawed studies. I mean, the
Yeah.
studies that Pfizer study was one of the worst studies on the planet. I have a doctor, a friend of mine, a anesthesiologist who works for Children's Health Defense, Robert Kennedy's organization,
Sure.
and you know, he he's doing some great work, and he and a couple of his colleagues have just picked apart that study, like really with fine hairs, and it's unbelievable how bad that study was, how flawed it was, and it was unbelievable the marketing that we got about how beneficial those things were going to be for us, but it wasn't based on reality. The studies were very flawed, but intentionally flawed. It's very I mean, you can only assume that they were intentionally flawed. I mean, I can't say that for a fact,
Right.
but you know for example, uh the the the, the second after the second shot of the Pfizer study, um, over 300 people left that study, were removed from the study, and only 60 from the non-shot. And the strange thing is, when they studied children, the exact same thing happened. So why did those 320 people get removed? Nowhere is it said why. All it says was inconsistencies. There were some, it just, and you can only, how can we not assume that and the patients or the people in the study, it wasn't blind. The people doing the study knew who were on the placebo and who were not. They knew. Where in a real study, you don't do that. So, the administrators knew. So anyway, there's a lot of that was just like tiny little problems of that study, but it's just crazy when you really pick it apart. So that's just an example of how big money can make a study, and they can use the marketing arm of media, and basically repeat something enough times that people believe it. And not to mention, media has a frequency of being quite hypnotic.
Hmm.
And some people who pride themselves as being anti hypnotic, anti cult, thinking for yourself. When you watch television, if you put me in a room with television and good food, for a week, and maybe have someone come in and massage my feet every once in a while, I will believe what's on that television after a week. If I mean, really, I mean, it's hypnotic, it's comfortable, pretty faces, nice sounds, everything's done so expertly. you know, we get hypnotized, we get brainwashed very, very easily. And it's, you know, people wonder like, how can this happen? But it's the technology of brainwashing. I mean, we know about brainwashing before television, not to mention television now. So I'm kind of going off on a little
No, it's beautiful.
thing there,
It's
but
beautiful.
yeah,
Let me throw it back to you this way, just for the sake of conversation. Let me play devil's
sure.
advocate. So in the world today, we have over 10,000 baby boomers retiring a day. When we look at the potential for Alzheimer's, uh, debilitating diseases, and we look at the technology for vaccines that have been grown in eggs for the last 50 years, we haven't really made any meaningful headway on diseases like Alzheimer's. We've just recently found out that all the drugs they were using, they're about as good as a placebo. And so when you're as a government, when you're as an industry looking at this giant cliff and the bus is about to go off of it, might it be that, hey, we have to start testing some real things on people, and maybe getting the body to fight diseases by injecting stuff in there and getting the body with these new mRNA vaccines, turning the body into its own factory to destroy debilitating diseases. We're just going to have to do it. We're going to have to start testing on people. And I'm sorry, it's a horrible thing. We're not going to let people know about it. But in the end, it's going to be something that benefits all of humanity. So we've done the cost benefit analysis. A lot of people are going to die, but we can't afford to do it. We can't help all these people. We're going to have to start testing. Let's just do it. I know that's wrong. But when you look at the face of disaster, when you look at the monetary cliff coming, why not do it?
When you say the monetary cliff, meaning because it costs so much to maintain sick people?
Like the amount of money that healthcare is going to cost countries in the next 50 years is going to be great, almost greater than GDP. And you're going to have more people who are out of the work system, and the amount of money people paying taxes can't afford that. Like you can't physically
Well,
afford to pay for all the sick people that are coming. So what do you do?
right. I mean, the bottom line really is the paradigm that they're coming from. Yes, if we keep poisoning people with toxic food, toxic water, toxic herbicides, pesticides, which cause cancer, cardiovascular disease. So we're going to have a sicker old population, and yes, with more Alzheimer's and senility and,
Yeah.
you know, so the statistically there will be more of that. So uh, if you're going to, if you, how can I even say this? If that's the paradigm that you're saying, if we, I can't even talk, if that's the way it's going to go, right? If, okay, the paradigm is, doesn't matter what we eat chemicals, we eat pesticides, we eat bad water, we eat junk food, we drink too much alcohol, we, have Wi-Fi buzzing everywhere through our bodies. We, take 80 vaccines as children, okay. So now when everyone's 50 years old, they start losing their brains. Okay, well, maybe there's something we can do to get people to be 75 and live with a brain, maybe, and then they'll just die. Okay, very nice. Perfect. So it's just that it's like coming at the whole thing from the wrong
Right.
perspective.
Right.
That's the problem. I mean, I understand what they're saying. They're saying it's like, okay, here's what I'm thinking. Like, whatever. I remember during the Iraq War, you know, there was a time when, there was a lot of argument about, like, should we go to war, shouldn't we go to war? And then we went to war, and then one of the first things in the media was, how dare you people criticize the war? There's people fighting for our country. How dare you? You're basically selfish, uncompassionate
Mhm.
people, because you shouldn't be. criticizing the war because therefore you're really criticizing the people who have gone there to sacrifice their lives for you. How dare you? But the problem is, if I didn't really believe that that war was worth fighting, it's not that I'm criticizing the people that have gone there. I'm criticizing the guys who decided to make it happen, and I don't believe the war should happen. So to kind of say, okay, now we need all these vaccines now because things are so bad that we got to do something. It's like saying, it's not acknowledging all the other bad stuff, all the other bad decisions that led to this point, which, if we're going to be thinking in this linear line of forcing the physiology in a certain direction, not considering anything else, then it's like saying we're not looking at our mistakes. We're not looking at what God is, and that's the whole purpose of Chinese medicine, Ayurveda, modern medicine that does real solid testing, blood testing, stool testing, urine testing, hormone, looks at it from another angle, looks much deeper at the body, genetic testing. So you can look at the cause, the upstream causes of what's going on. That's the problem. They're just treating symptoms again. That's all they're doing is treating symptoms, symptoms, symptoms. And if you treat symptoms, you just get sicker. If I take Advil every once in a while, I take it maybe, I have taken it maybe once every couple of years. If I'm like, really, I'm like, the hell with them, just give me something, I'm suffering, Yeah. But, but if I remember when Advil first came out, I was like hearing people say, I can go to the gym now. I take it every single day now when I go to the gym, and I take it like, I'm going to take this stuff the rest of my life. But then what happens? We find out later that, not only does it decrease inflammation, but it prevents healthy immune response. And therefore your stomach falls apart and your kidneys start falling apart and your blood vessels get injured, because you're treating a symptom way downstream. It's like a river that's polluted and you just keep, going way down the river and cleaning it up. But if you go really where the cause of the pollution is, and you take care of that, then the rest of the river will be clean. So we really have a backwards approach. And I hear that argument that you're saying, and there's a way in which, we got to do something, but the something is coming from like out of left field, and it's not based on natural laws. It's not based on the human being. It's not based on the respect for life. It's not based on the reality that human beings have a purpose here, that we have a dharma, we have a purpose. We're spirit souls in a body, and we're meant to grow in our heart and our consciousness and understand who we are. That system of medicine could care less about that. That system of medicine is, okay, you live for a few years, try to eke out as much pleasure, and then die. It's like there's no intelligence to what's the purpose of life. And how does what we put in our body and what do we do and how does that affect our consciousness? It's as if consciousness isn't real, but it is real. We're human beings. We're human beings according to the Vedic understanding. It is the greatest gift to have a human form of life. It's a great gift and potential, because we can actually, there's a lot of things, but one of those things is we can actually begin to understand who we really are. Like, who am I? What is the purpose of my life? What is love? So anyway, hope that wasn't too long, but that's an answer to that question.
No, it's beautiful, because and I don't necessarily believe the idea of what I said, but I always like to get people's opinion. And I like the way you said it. Yeah, you gotta push it, and that way people have ammunition to fire back when they hear that argument, or they have some competing ideas to think about it and make up their own mind. But I love the way the metaphor of the river, because it seems to me that if we just look at all of us, all the people on the planet as one organism, we're all suffering this narrow, short-sighted view, whether it's cleaning up the river at the end instead of cleaning it up at the source, or whether it's just trying to make it through the day instead of seeing the long-term, consequences of things. But it seems that there's this narrow, short-sighted view that is plaguing humanity, whether it's through monetary problems, whether it's through government, or whether it's through healing. And when we as the individual, we do the cleanse for life, or we begin to clean up our own body, we cleanse our own spirit, then it's like you're doing your part to clean up the world. Like you begin cleaning up you. Now you can go and influence other people and point them in a direction of how you've done it. And it piggybacks on the idea that you talked about. If you're going to prescribe something for somebody, be it a treatment, an herb, or a strategy, it's probably best that you have done that strategy, tried that herb, or tried that thing before, because how
Right.
else do you know it works? And so I, I, I think it's beautiful what you said, and it makes me think things. And that's always the sign of a great conversation, is when you begin having new ideas and stuff. I'm curious. Can you tell me what does a day in the Healing Essence Center look like? Like, what does a day for you look like?
Well, here's my treatment room.
Okay, nice.
Um, so yeah, I come in, in the morning. I start my day usually around 9:30, 10 o'clock in the morning, and I do my meditation and everything that in the morning to help me stay focused and connected. And so I see usually about 8 or 10 patients in a day, and I have a couple treatment rooms, and I do something called muscle testing, kinesiology, and then we do some acupuncture points and make some dietary nutritional recommendations, and then go to the next person. So that's what I'm doing all day long, and hearing all kinds of stories and tales, and dealing with the different conditions and the stressors and the issues that people are going through right now, and the health issues that they're going through right now. So yeah. And then when I'm not doing that, we'll do a cleanse a couple times a year, spring and fall. And then also I'm doing one-on-one cleanses with a lot of people. Um, yeah. So that's my day.
Yeah, it sounds awesome to me. Have you found, we've already talked about a connection between meridians on the planet and meridians in people, but as you begin telling me a little bit more about acupuncture and blockage, what have you learned? It seems to me that when you begin applying strategies that help people, you learn a lot about your own life and your own connections and your own
Mm.
blockages. Have you learned a lot about
Mm.
relationships in yourself while you work on humans, or has that treatment actually taught you things?
Oh yeah. I mean, like, well, for one thing, when you get to do I guess you could call it the privilege of doing healing work,
Sure.
it's pretty amazing. And oftentimes my energy will shift when I show up for another person. So I have a saying that the foundation of healing is presence, or
Mhm.
presence is the foundation of healing. And it's just the intention of being present. It doesn't mean you have to be perfect. That was something that I kind of figured out, and I had some good teachers along the way. And but it's really important, just the intention to be present for another human being and really hear what's going on. It means that I get to slow down within myself, and I can be more perceptive about myself because I'm slowing down for someone else too. And then in my personal relationships, I try to do the same. I try to do it with my wife, I try to do it with my son. Not that I always want to be in healing mode, because that's not, but just being present, whether it's, even just having a good time, and talking about, nothing of great consequence, but being present is hugely important. So I would say that's one of the most important things. Um, but yeah, seeing oftentimes in healing too, it's just the way it works, where, I might be going through some kind of issue, and then the person right in front of me, they start articulating exactly what I'm going through. It's like, wow, this is wild. That
Yeah,
happens a
yeah,
lot,
yeah.
and then you just kind of surrender and go, okay, that's just the universe. Gone are the days that I think I have to be perfect in order to be a healer. Now, I want to keep working on myself. There's no doubt about that. I mean, you don't want to get stagnant. You got to keep moving forward. I think that's important because there's kind of a saying, if you don't move forward, you start going backwards. So you got to keep moving forward. But perfection is not the goal, but being as aware, being the best you can be at any given moment is the goal. And the miracle is, or the mystical thing is, that that's enough, and that creates a healing space for people. Just showing up and being present creates a healing space. And then you use, then I use the tools that I've been given. And that's another thing. I appreciate the tools now that I was given from my acupuncture teacher in the 90s more than I did back then, I tell you, and more than I did 10 years ago. There was even a time like years ago that I was like, this is a little boring. Maybe there's not as much to it as I thought. There was a little phase there. And then, oh my gosh, there's stuff that I can do with acupuncture that, when you can do it and you do it on a regular basis, sometimes you think other people, or that it's normal. It's not normal. I mean, it's such a gift to have certain tools. And a lot of healers have their tools,
Yeah.
whatever it is they do that they really hook into, and it really works for them. So, over time, trusting more, my own gifts as a healer. I mean, I think I'm doing what I'm here to do. And also being grateful for the gifts that I've been given and the great teachers I've had. And then just keep trying to show up and be the best that I can with each person as much as possible. I mean, that's the blessing of it. I mean, that's why I love doing this work, is that every day it gives me the chance to show up, and, one of my teachers says, leave yourself outside the door. But another way of looking at it is bring your real self inside the door, and, let go of the other stuff that doesn't matter so much. So that's a nice opportunity too, to be able to go, okay, I'm worried about this situation in my life, but okay, I'm just going to show up right now and just be here, and see what magic happens. And a lot of times magic happens.
Yeah. I think magic happens more than people thoroughly understand. I think it's happening all the time, and we just don't have the language to describe it. I'm curious.
Exactly.
I'm curious about when you talk about tools and healing and mentors and plant medicine. There's been sort of a renaissance almost, or maybe that's not the right word to use, but it seems to me that there's been a lot of people beginning to turn towards plant medicine to heal PTSD. Like they're turning to psilocybin mushrooms or ayahuasca or these medicines that have been, in different cultures for thousands of years, probably. I'm wondering, are there are there some sort of psychedelic medicines in the Chinese medicine that maybe you're aware of?
In the Chinese medicine, there's definitely, I honestly don't know if they were used in that way. I know in Ayurveda they were. But in Chinese medicine, there's definitely a wide cornucopia of herbs that do affect the consciousness and the mind in different ways. So there's definitely that whole realm. In terms of herbs that are used, sort of like ayahuasca, that type of thing, I don't know, honestly. I have not heard of anything. It's a really good question.
Yeah, I've seen some stuff like Tongkat Ali and like just the different herbs that are used, and it's so amazing to me how the right person with the right education in those herbs can fundamentally help someone change their point of view or seeing the world, or maybe catch a glimpse of clarity that can change them, because ultimately they're going to have to do the work. But it's amazing to me, and I really admire the ability to combine the spirit, the mind, and the soul, and I think it's a big part of medicine. We're getting close to time. Let's talk. Maybe we could talk just a little bit more about the book and the cleanse, and maybe you can tell us what inspired you to write that book. Like, I'm sure you've been doing medicine for quite some time, and now all of a sudden the book comes out. And what is it that you hope the book achieves for people?
The book was, I actually thought the book was going to be really easy to write because we had PowerPoint slides for our whole cleanse.
Right.
I thought, I'll get this done in a couple months because I just have to basically write put words in between the PowerPoint slides, and it became a whole nother thing. It was like
Yeah.
a whole life in and of itself. And I really wanted to try to communicate uh, in a very easy, like deep, profound, but easy way,
Yeah.
the basic principles of health and healing and Ayurveda and the reasons for detoxification. So the first half of the book is all about that. Second half is how to do the cleanse.
Right.
So people really like the book when they read it because and Ayurveda and Chinese medicine inherently does this, is that it automatically opens up your worldview. And that's one of the things that I'm very passionate about is I believe that when we open up our worldview, and it's quite coherent, that it's a very healthy way to enter into expanding how we see ourselves, how we see the world, how we take care of ourselves. And it's very, I value supporting people in growing in physically, not just physically, but in their consciousness as a human being. I'm very passionate about that. So my book is a strong nudge toward that, with a lot of information in there that seems to do it. I also found that the book, not to get not so esoteric, but I find that people just reading it automatically opens up their mind. It's not like, it just does that because the principles are so solid. They're actually common sense. It's like it appeals to the natural, innate intelligence that's in everyone. And it has enough logic, has enough spirituality, has enough science that it's very appealing to the mind and the heart and the consciousness. And therefore, it inspires people to make positive steps in their health and well-being. And it has enough practical stuff in there. You can just open and go, yeah, this is going to help my health, So that's why I did it, so that now, people who have done the cleanse, they can use it as a tool during the cleanse. I have people read it during the cleanse, because what you're putting in your mind, you also have to digest. Everything we eat, everything we see, everything we hear, everything we touch, everything we smell, we have to digest it. And in this age that we're living in, of the age of anxiety, I call it, Kali Yuga, it's a very stressful time, right? And everybody's anxious for the most part, to some degree. And a lot of that is because we're taking in so much that's disturbing the nervous system, disturbing the mind. We have to digest that and process it and let it go. So that's another reason it's good to cleanse, because we have some time just to kind of go, you know what, let's just chill it all out, come off the social media. It used to be, we used to have to tell people, stop watching so much television. But, that's like nothing. Hold on one second.
Yeah, of course.
Oh, my patient just got here, so
No,
I actually
understand.
have to go too.
No problem. Well, I really appreciate your time, and I'm sure we'll be back to talk again. And I'm
That was
thankful
awesome.
for, yeah, it really was. I'll put the links to the show notes. I'll put the links to the book and the center in the show notes. Everybody check out Jonathan.
Awesome.
He's a great person to talk to, and I appreciate what you're doing. I'll let you get out of here. Is there anything you want to say
Sure.
before?
Thank you so much. Really appreciate it.
Okay. Aloha.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.